Thank you everyone for joining us today. The topic of today is ramp up your business and switch from an employee to a CEO mindset. And I have the great privilege of introducing Loren Fogelman. She is a friend, she is a colleague, and she is a professional coach. And I'd like, Loren, for you to say hello to the group and a brief introduction. I have a few things that I want to do before, so we'll get into your expertise in a minute, but just a hello and let people know who you are.
Okay, absolutely, thank you. Basically, I am a sports psychologist turned business coach. What I have been finding over the last couple of years since I moved in this direction in 2009 is who is it that I work best with? And I have actually found that the people who get the absolute best results from what I do are accounting professionals, bookkeepers, EAs, CPAs, and my focus is really on the pricing piece, how to be able to separate your time from money, because I believe that bookkeeping professionals, accounting professionals, they are really part of what is saving this economy. They are such an integral piece to the economy that when you do well, when you help your clients do well, it's just like taking people up the ladder with you, and it's this wave of positivity.
So, oh, I didn't even realize my video wasn't on.
There you go.
So before we get into the meat of our discussion, a few things I want to stage for the group. Now, Loren and I have done this. This is our 6th time. It was broken into 2 series, and I put the series in the chat window. The first series, I want to make sure I have the right one, was called Expand Your Practice by Owning Your Expertise and Earning What You're Worth. And there was 3 specific discussions, how to step up to the trusted advisor, successfully raise your rates without losing clients, and how to create irresistible packages. There was a second session, and this is part of a 3-part series. This is our 3rd. We did develop a highly profitable niche for your business, time management and secrets for busy accounting professionals, and then today wraps the 3rd of the series, how to step up to the CEO mindset. A few things on LeanLaw. We're a timekeeping and invoicing software as a service with deep integration to QuickBooks. Our positioning in the world is that we have the best integration with QuickBooks Online for the law community. Number 2 is we have a very narrow focus at servicing mid-market firms, those with 5 and above. We still have a core product and a kinship to smaller micro practices, but our focus moving forward will be to build an architecture around that mid-market. And our 3rd unique point of distinction is that we're invoicing only, and we collaborate with other tools to fill out some of the practice management features. But so LeanLaw is really good at integration with QuickBooks, really focused on invoicing, and our target audience is mid-market. So understand that. We just recently released a LeanLaw Pro product that is closely aligned with QuickBooks Online Advanced. So those firms that need more sophisticated accounting, more horsepower, more service, and more bulk features, that is QuickBooks Online Advanced and LeanLaw. We're not here to talk about that. I want to do one poll just to kind of get a sense of folks, and it's related to, do you work with law clients? So I'm going to launch the poll and get some answers, and we'll do that for 30 seconds, and then we'll dive into the discussion. Another 10 seconds or so. Wow.
Well, you have a consensus here.
Yeah, I've never seen that. So what the consensus was is that everyone has a law client, but it's a mix of some other clients. So this conversation is universal to all accounting professionals, but I was curious about a specificity with law for what LeanLaw does. Last note, in the chat window, you'll see some other mentions to our blog, and specifically, we wrote a really great blog post, which we're turning into a white paper about mid-market and how to onboard. It's almost a software buyer's guide for mid-market. So you'll see some really nice content pieces that can be useful as a function of working with law firms coming from us in our blog post. Okay, that's it for the LeanLaw side of it. Let's talk about your expertise. So I think you've already sort of set the stage, Lauren, a little bit about your professional experience, but help me put some context into that. We talked about this being a 3-part series, and you've walked us through these stages to get where we are. So maybe just for the group, let's go back a little and speak to the other two. Now, if you guys see me looking right, it's because I have 3 monitors, and so I cheated, but I'm cheating to look at some of my notes. But we talked about this developing a highly profitable niche practice. We talked about time management secrets. How did a little overview on those, and how do they parlay into today's discussion?
When you and I first talked about this series, it was really coming from the frame of what would be a business builders series that would work really, really well. But basically, these 3 topics of developing a profitable niche, time management, and then today going from the employee to the CEO mindset, all are business building foundations that bookkeepers can apply to really start to make their business more profitable and separate their time from money. The other thing that I see, which really goes very nicely, is there's a lot of influence right now for bookkeepers to transition from technician to trusted advisor for many, many different reasons. And this helps you to really start to make that shift of not just doing the compliance and working in your business, but really recognizing your highest value and how to really make that shift to working on your business.
Yeah, and we've seen it on our side. I mean, we have our LeanLaw Accounting Pro program, which I hope all of the attendees are there. By the way, I forgot to mention this. Lauren and I will both be monitoring the chat. If there's a question or comment that comes up, please ask. We'll do our best to answer it either live in the conversation, or one of us will absolutely follow up on it. So what we've seen in my personal relationship with our Accounting Pro community is this idea that kind of twofold. One is this idea that niching is empowering and liberating, that you and I have talked about, and that when you're interacting with law firms, the mechanics of bookkeeping is almost it's almost a means to an end, meaning it certainly is a dialogue point, but the real relationships blossom into this trusted advisor and really creating these relationships with these law firms and thinking about a more complex and sophisticated conversation. So with that backdrop, let's get into kind of moving it forward. So how, I think that when you're working with a bookkeeper or an accounting professional, they're super busy, right? Because they're doers and they're managers. And how do you, starting with the premise of how do you operate without sacrificing, parts of your life? So how do you even deal with this idea of more without giving up and giving in to things that you may value and are important?
I think the first thing to recognize is that most of us started out being employees working for somebody else. Then we transitioned into being entrepreneurs, business owners, because that we start out with this employee mindset as we quit our day job. And we don't recognize maybe that it's not just about filing some paperwork to be able to get set up with the state and get your EIN number, putting your website up and maybe some social media posts. It's recognizing that how you approach your business is different than how you would approach a 9-to-5. If you don't become aware of those nuances, then what happens is that you either end up in a situation where your business runs you, which is what happens with a lot of bookkeeping professionals, or you run your business. What this is, our topic today is really going to focus on is how do you run your business instead of it letting run you, because otherwise you're just creating another high demanding job for yourself. And it's really going to become problematic. You're going to have to make sacrifices down the road. And there's a couple reasons about why that happens. One, as I said, you start out working for somebody else. So that's the mindset we bring into our business. The second thing is that you're service oriented. You want to go ahead and really please and accommodate your clients. Because of that, you might find that you're very agreeable and say yes maybe too easily to things, even things that aren't aligned with what you want, the direction you want your business to go in. And the third thing is really about self-confidence. A lot of times there might be times when you start to overthink things, you second guess yourself, or there might be boundary issues, which then has your business creep into your personal life. So those are the three things. You start out working for somebody else, you're service oriented, and there might be some self-confidence issues too.
Well, and also I think, I've had some personal experience. I started a company in the early 2000s, 2004, that was service focused. And I think what you just said, that, either you run your business or it runs you. This business was running me. It was service focused. And there was always that gradation between what, we're not going to get into this in this conversation, but what you're billing and what you're not billing for. And at the end of the day, you're always trying to, as a service provider, please someone. And where is that boundary? And what do you find? I'm going to get to this, but I want to probe a little bit around the psychology of all this, because that's what we're really talking about. How do you coach someone through that? Meaning, what is that process that someone develops boundaries? I mean, what are some of the tactics that they do to try to get out of this idea that I'm going to create a boundary and value other parts of my life? A boundary might be personal to professional life. The boundary might be with a client. Mm-hmm. What are some tactics that you coach people into to move into that space and be more disciplined there?
I believe the first thing is awareness that you're having this come up. It's gotten to the point where you can't sustain like this any longer, because most of us are motivated by pain than we are by potential. It eventually gets to a breaking point. And Jonathan, that was true for me also, where my prior business, where I was working with Steve in our counseling agency, I was working into the evening seeing clients. I was working on weekends doing compliance paperwork. Not only did I sacrifice, but my family paid a toll also. I was burning out, and it was really because the burnout that I started looking for, there had to be a better way. When that happens and now you have this awareness and you're ready to make some changes, then a lot of times there might be some research that you do. It also, with my clients, is we're talking about what is going on right now coming up. Then we're talking about what are some of the underlying beliefs that causes that to happen, and not a lot, but enough to have some insight and awareness to avoid continuing to be in that situation again and again. Then we're looking at steps on how to be able to shift an approach in order to do it in a way that feels genuine and authentic for you. I will let you know that if you are someone who says yes a lot, it's getting in the way where you're doing a lot of things and being pulled in many different directions, then it is about finding a way to say, let me think about it. And this is exactly what you do. If you say yes and you're doing it because you feel that you're under pressure, all you need to do is say, let me think about it and I will get back with you. Yeah. This gives you a chance to just step back, think about whether you really want to do it or not. And you can either get back to them by text message, by email, by a phone call, whatever works best for you. But it takes away the pressure of feeling like you have to say yes on the spot. Otherwise, you're going to be disappointing someone.
I think it's also, there's some real maturity there, and we'll get on to the next subject. But what I've learned in the multiple iterations of working for myself, or in an independent way, is that I just got to a point where I started to move slower in feeling like I didn't need to be as responsive, and being able to compartmentalize and just say, I'm not going to work this afternoon because I need this time for myself, or I'm not going to respond, and really just being more disciplined and having, to your point, for your previous point, having the confidence to know that, people were investing in me and they saw my value. And the fact that I couldn't get to them in this minute, or that I said no, or I said it's going to cost you something, they accepted that because they wanted to do work with me. So let's go to let's kind of move and use this as a segue and talk about, people are motivated for many different reasons to go into business for themselves, whatever that may. So when they think of that, what are the models that people are sort of working into, whether they kind of know it or not? So what are these business, the types of businesses, and how do they sort of influence the behavior, right? So there's these ideas, and then you pick one, and then that dictates some behaviors downstream that you might go. So maybe speak to that a bit.
Sure. I don't always know if somebody consciously moves into one of these three categories I'm going to talk about or not. Sometimes it just happens organically, and other times it's a very conscientious mood depending on the individual. The first category is really that hobby business where you have your 9 to 5, you start doing a little bit of a side hustle to get some additional income, whether it's to pay an additional bill that came up or some shoe money, whatever it might be. But it's first a hobby business. What happens with that is that you're really focusing on the tasks, being able to do work, trading dollars for hours. It's a lot of that employee mindset, once again, because you don't really see this as legs, where it might actually go ahead and replace your 9 to 5 down the road. The second part is the lifestyle business, and that's where I'm at. It was a very, very conscious choice of me to have a lifestyle business where I finally have gotten brutally honest with myself. I can't do it all. I need to have help in order to be able to maintain my sanity, as well as to be able to continue with other parts of my life that are important to me. Because I'm looking at a lifestyle business where I'm not doing it all myself, and this is true for a lot of people that are here as well, you start to develop systems, and you have to recognize that you might be holding on to some things that are below your pay grade and somebody else could be doing, which frees you up to do your higher level work.
Hold on one second, Lauren, before you get to the next one.
Yeah.
Can you be more explicit as to defining what a lifestyle business is to the group? You sort of said what it was about, but how do you define that? If someone said, what's a lifestyle business?
I have a business that supports my lifestyle instead of sucks the life out of me. The previous one where I was working weekends and on evenings, I was just working. It really led to burnout. This business is more about how to be able to serve my clients, but recognizing that I'm not the only one that can do it, or that I don't need to be doing all the back end myself, because I'm not necessarily the best person to do that. I love traveling, Jonathan.
Yes,
I
know.
I wanted a business that gave me the ability to do something that Steve and I very much enjoy. Our kids live all over the world, and we wanted to be able to spend time with family. And this way, I structured my business so that I could be anywhere in the world and work with my clients, or they could be anywhere and work with me. It gave me a lot of freedoms. Now, when I work really, really hard. That's just how I am. But I make sure that I am able to take downtime and actually unplug, and it doesn't affect my income. And that's really a key point, is once we start to shift bookkeepers away from trading dollars for hours, they can be sick, or they can travel, or whatever it is. They can step away from their business and it doesn't affect their income, which is some of the work that I'm doing with some mutual bookkeeping clients that we have. Is one of them wants to go sailing for a year in New Zealand. Another one, she wants to go see her family that lives in Italy for a month. And we're really looking at how to put those things in place.
So I want to, hold on, I'm interrupting you because I want to.
That's okay.
I want to add a little structure to that. So commonly in the scheme of business, a lifestyle business, you're talking sort of the value or the ideology around a lifestyle business. What it fundamentally typically means is that it's a sole proprietorship, or it's an LLC that has 1 or 2 member units, meaning the people who run the business own the business. And they don't have, and we're going to get to this, any investors or other obligations, such that the lifestyle business is something they own. And then to your point, they can visualize and have vision for how they want to live and how the business serves them. And it, essentially is their income, it is their livelihood. But fundamentally, in a sort of mechanical definition, it gets down into ownership. You own the business exclusively, or you and a partner own the business exclusively, so that you have full domain over how it operates. and how it pays you, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have a third party shareholders or someone else that you're
Yes.
indebted to that you have to make decisions. So now go to your third grouping, which I think is what your segue was.
Thank you. The third one is investor ready. This is regardless of whether you're a small firm or a large firm, you actually move into developing your business with your exit plan in mind. It might not be that you're seeking investors right now. However, you want to be ready for them when that opportunity appears, which means that you are approaching it more like that corporate structure where things are systematized, you delegate tasks to your team, you focus on your highest value, which is your advisory services, and you're setting things up in place so that there can be potential growth.
Yeah,
so that is investor ready.
Yeah, when you do an investor ready business, you might take some seed capital from, from a friend or family. That turns into equity. Now someone is a stockholder, whether it's preferred or common. Now you have obligations. So the minute you think that way, you have obligations to transact. At some point when someone puts $1, unless it's your father or mother or rich cousin, they expect to get their money back. And so an investor ready business has a different framework and mindset because you're building it such that you have a third party stakeholder. Now that can accelerate it. You can build a big business and you can still have aspects of lifestyle within a privately held company, but you have a concession to a third party. I have a personal experience, and this is one comment about, because I think the keynote here is know what you're building. That same business that was really draining me, I thought it was an investor ready business, and I was building it that way. And what I realized is I had a lifestyle business, and I wasn't sure that I wanted that lifestyle business, right? And it was a huge mistake because I spent all this time and money and energy talking to investors and building out branding and doing all these things to make it investor ready. And what I should have been doing from the get-go was building a lifestyle business, because it's a much easier business to build than an investor ready thing.
And a lifestyle business can be sold to
absolutely
another firm also. Just don't want to put that out there.
Absolutely. There's value in your revenue, people, brand, solution. And people may want to buy that. It's very common that people sell lifestyle businesses and transact either cash or some type of debt-based, not debt, but sort of a what's it called? Where you give them a little bit of revenue every month, residual kind of transaction. So let's move forward and talk. Now, so we talked a little bit about what we're building and the psychology of what we're building. So mindset, you talk about that all the time. It's a really critical factor in it. And, bookkeepers are starting and accounting professionals are starting typically by working with someone else. I mean, most of them aren't coming out and saying, I'm building a company and I'm in it like an engineer might with a software company. So how do you shift from that employee mindset to what you're speaking to, the CEO mindset? What's that process like?
Well, I think that one of the things to recognize is that there's some personality things as to why people decide to be business owners as opposed to continuing to work for somebody else as a W-2. One of the things is a lot of times we're fiercely independent. We want things a certain way. We don't feel that nobody else can do it to the same degree that we can, or that we can do it faster. Bringing someone else on is going to slow me down and take me away from that. A lot of it has to do with the questions that come up when problems come up, because at some point problems will arise in your business. Now, if you're coming from that employee mindset, the response will be, how do I fix that? And a lot of times that is really how employees look at something, because it's going to be in your domain. But the CEO approaches it a little bit differently. The CEO is going to think about, how can that be fixed? And who do I need to have help me? Part of the reason that the CEO is approaching this differently is because they recognize that a lot of their highest value is about the fact that they have insights, they generate ideas, they don't necessarily need to be the one to do it. They want to surround themselves with people who are actually better at some things than they do, because that they don't want to do all the tasks in their firm. I'm going to tell you a strategy that I give to my clients when we're looking to separate them from the day-to-day compliance work in their bookkeeping business is I tell them to go ahead and write a list of every single thing that they do in their business, everything, including the toilets, and that after they go ahead and do that list, I want them to go ahead and put someone else's name next to that task, every single task on their list. I want them to put someone else's name there. Now, some of them are solopreneurs, they don't have a team. Then if that's the case, go ahead and write what is the position of that person going to be that will eventually take that off your plate. It's a really interesting task to go through, is looking at everything that you're doing. You're going to realize that some things are below your pay grade, which means that, like most business owners, we are usually the bottleneck to our own growth and profitability. We hold back our business from growing more. And look at what some of those positions are, because some of them, you might already have an assistant that's working for you that might be able to take that on, which then frees you up to do higher level advisory services. And once again, to recognize, you want your response to problems to be from how can I do that to how can this be done and who can help me? And that changes everything, because the first question of can I do this keeps you stuck in the problem. When you shift it to how can this be done and who can help me, it really emphasizes the potential of where your business can go.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking while you were saying that about our mutual friend, the New Zealand sailing person, and how that person, when that person wrote the list, that must have been like, oh my gosh. And it's intuitive because, we're going to talk about this, but by nature, the accounting bookkeeping mindset is controlling, right? It all has to be lined up. And people who start businesses have the idea that they do it better than everyone else. And what's interesting about that is they're probably right in the context of knowing it for their business in that moment. But at the same time, it's just as important to take that process and build infrastructure and think about how you can delegate that, because you can never grow if you think you're going to do it all. And it takes a little bit of trust to allow a delegate to fail, right? Because that's when we just hired a bunch of people at LeanLaw, and I specifically hired 2 people on my team. And this one person, I'll tell the story now because we were talking about it. So there's one person, and I actually hired her replacement. And I had this meeting with her and I said, you're fired. And it was, she was shocked, and we had talked about all sorts of times where she needed to do process improvement, but she was shocked. And so I wanted to give her a soft landing. I didn't have a lot of severance. So what I did was I said, stay on, help train this person, and we'll keep paying you for a few weeks while we do this. The other person quits, so hire right. And it was interesting because I'm sitting at a meeting with her saying, well, I guess I'm going to go look, but you can step up and do some of the things you're doing. And something clicked in her. And I'd always said, it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail. But finally, she owned up to the idea that she, had to move forward. She could, if she failed, she failed, but she was going to lose this job. And that kind of goes back to this mindset of that CEO, because I've had this. It's like, if you can't let go and delegate and allow that team member to fail, your business ultimately will fail. Maybe financially successful, but it'll go back to your point of saying, what emotionally did I give up, right, in my life? What spiritually did I give up? What did I give up in my parenting? What did I lose? So you could have a lot of money, but not have a lot of satisfaction and joy. So, we talked about this moving to this mindset and infrastructure. Let's talk a little bit about how we get there, right? So, technology and technology landscape is changing like crazy. And even in this moment in time, this pandemic is even put it on steroids, right? Everyone used to, I can't imagine all the people with desktop QuickBooks, and they're like, how do we do our financials? Everyone's trying to figure out VPNs and team viewers and things like that. And it's accelerating another technological change. So some people can embrace it and some can't, right? So how is that mindset? You know, why do some resist it and some just are all over it, on top of it? They're just always on the cutting edge of it.
Jonathan, history repeats itself. Right now, I see the accounting industry, especially for bookkeepers, going down the same path as travel agents in 2009 when Priceline first came on the scene. Whoa. At that point, it was really, Priceline just killed it. They took it over, and then there were a lot of other similar business models that came up as a result of that. And the travel agents, as we knew it, all those storefronts went away. Because of that, bookkeeping right now is absolutely in that same place where you're going to either have to be able to adapt, or you're going to go ahead and have to find something else. You're going to be shutting your doors. With that, it comes down to adaptability. Adaptability is actually a combination of two qualities, flexibility and versatility. Flexibility is about attitude. And it's really difficult for a lot of bookkeepers to adapt when you tend to be risk adverse anyway. You tend to be second guessing a lot, or you get stuck in research. And therefore, adaptation is really difficult because it might be contrary to your personality type. The other thing is the versatility, and the versatility is recognizing that, yes, you can change. It's a matter of whether you choose to change or perish at this point. And the other part that goes with this that makes a lot of people hold back from adapting and making those adjustments, then most bookkeepers are not early adopters. They wait and see. They want to make sure that all the bugs will work out, or that it's going to stick around, and so on and so forth. And because of that, a lot of times it's because we tend to have control issues. We like to be in control of everything, our environment, other people, hopefully, which makes it difficult then to be able to work with other people. Well, the only thing that we are in control of, and there's only two, it's your actions and your attitude. If you think you can control anything else, that's an illusion. And I will tell you from my personal experience, that was something that was really difficult for me when I was working in a counseling agency, is that we had two offices. I was working in the satellite office because I'm fiercely independent and I like doing things my way. However, I was also the biggest income producer, but it was at a cost of time now because I was working so much. And it got to the point where I just didn't have any more capacity. Well, I finally had to figure out that I was holding our agency back from having more profitability and growing because I just didn't play well with other people. And I had to be able to figure out how to be able to make those changes in order to adapt, because otherwise it was going to burn me out and lead to other problems down the road, which weren't necessary. So it's really, right now, bookkeeping is going down the same path as travel agents were in 2009 when Priceline came on. And either you adapt and you adjust, or you're going to go ahead and at some point probably close your doors because you were too late to get on the bandwagon.
Yeah, we see it a little bit in the LeanLaw side. In the point that where I see the trepidation is that someone comes into our queue, an accounting professional, and they say, I really want to work with law. And I think there's two sort of components of inertia related to that. One is that they feel like they're not ready in the sense that, well, they don't have their marketing materials, so they have to do their website. And it's like, all of that doesn't mean anything. It's like, go just get a meeting with a lawyer and learn and start talking, right? And the second piece is that people who may have law clients are like, well, I don't know your product well enough to recommend it. Although they know it and they can technically see it work, they can see the crowd saying it works. There's enough data that says, hey, this is as good of a solution as anything else. But because of their own like I have to know it perfectly before I think I'm going to put my name on it. And what the reality is you never know any tool until you actually find a client to use it. And at some point, you just have to find a solution. And it kind of goes back to this guy, Lou Hawthorne. No one knows who Lou Hawthorne was, but he said something to me. He was a very smart guy when I was in my 20s. He was a little older. And I got a job and I was very anxious. And he said, they're not hiring you because you know all the answers. They're hiring you because they believe you can go find the answers. And I think that's really something that this audience needs to know when they're talking to law firms, is that no one expects you to know all the answers. And it goes back to this whole mindset of being nimble and going forward when you don't have all of everything perfectly aligned, is that they're looking at you to go find the solutions. You, of course, have to have some subject matter expertise, but it's not explicitly about that. So technology, I think, is one thing. Technology, I think, really exploits that more so than anything else, because people feel intimidated by a tool, or they get stuck in what they know and they never will branch out because this is the thing I use over and over, and they're not innovating.
Right, right. And Karen brought up a great point that she wants to have some assistance, but needs to get her systems ready. I agree that having systems are in place, but once again, I just want to gently point out that it is that employee mindset of thinking I have to be the one to create the systems. It could be that you bring someone on and that you tell them the systems and they're the ones that create the policy and procedures manual of how that works. Or it could also be screen share. So systems don't necessarily have to be written any longer. They can be video now. And it can be done a lot more easily than most of us think that it can be.
Yeah, I'll give two examples.
And then we're going to move on, right?
Yeah. We got a lot more to cover, but two quick examples. Fred, our CTO, was having a meeting with the CTO of what is now T-Sheets, and now he's an Intuit employee. And Fred felt this anxiety about his code base and that he should start cleaning all this stuff up and doing all these things. And this guy's name is JD Mullins, looked at Fred and said, that's just BS. He said, go get clients and make features that serve clients. He said, it's all about winning clients and serving them. Your code will clean up. And translated, processes can come and handbooks can be created. It's all about moving forward and having the courage to move forward. Okay, we talked too much about that. Sorry.
That's okay.
So when we're talking about, we're talking about this shift in controlling, talking about further about control and shifting to that CEO mindset. And how does control affect growth? So we talked about like being growth, but how does it directly impact growth?
The way that I look at it is that I believe that we need to be more like Frank Sinatra. Recognizing that Frank Sinatra didn't move his own piano. He had a whole team and crew. He had his manager do the bookings for him and to find the next gigs to be able to go ahead and play out when he was on tour. He had his roadies that were moving the equipment for him, getting it set up when he was going to the next venue or breaking it down after a concert. Basically, Frank Sinatra just got to show up and play the piano. He didn't do any of the labor-intensive work or the management behind the scenes. And that was really what I found as I was really trying to grow, and I recognized that I was the bottleneck, is management actually wasn't really my strong suit. Because I felt that with the employees I hired, either they had great people skills or they had fantastic back office skills, but not most. Because of that, my own control issues actually got in the way. But that was really holding me back. I wasn't making as much money and I burned down. Part of what I had to do was be able to reframe how I looked at assistants. And with some of that, it was letting my husband, Steve, actually manage them because he worked with them better than I did at that time. And this was back before 2009 when I moved in another direction. But it was really recognizing that I wanted my clients to have a very certain experience. I wanted everybody to work at the same level and the same way that I worked, and it was actually holding back the business, and it was burning me out. I was really the bottleneck. And the main thing that came out of this, Jonathan, I'm sure that you'll agree with this also, is that I recognized that my employees were actually our greatest asset and our greatest resource. It took a bit of time, and it's something I continue to work on, but that it's really about letting go. And now I love having people assist me and take things off my plate, because I recognize that there are other people who are much better and faster at doing things, certain things, than I am. And it's a relief knowing that I can pass it on and get it done, as opposed to realizing that I have to be doing all these things myself.
So Lorette asked and hi Lorette, by the way, sort of made a statement question. I think it plays into what you're saying. So you're saying on a certain level, I had to take on a CEO mindset, right? And I had to delegate and be, know what I'm doing, all these different things we've discussed. And she said, unfortunately, staff members have an employee mindset, and they want the system developed. And so, I'm going to use the first part of that, which is the employee mindset, right? And they want the system developed. And Lorette, I would challenge you, because I can tell you a bunch of LeanLaw people, we don't have a workflow set, and we on our team say, we go figure it out. And it's about, to me, on my side, it's about delegating the authority, accountability, and the ability, the accountability and the time to go figure out the plan, and then, offering you say, but how does that CEO mindset manage staff that maybe don't share that same vigor that you have?
Part of what I responded is that it's about the type of personality that you hire. You want to find people who take initiative. You want to actually look for takers. Takers are people who want to take things off your plate. The problem that and you and I talked about this yesterday, Jonathan, as we were preparing, the problem that so many accounting professionals run into is that they create a codependent business. They hire people who are codependent on the firm owner, so the bookkeeper, the accountant, and they look to that person for giving them permission. You have to babysit them, you have to spoon feed them, and they don't really make decisions for themselves. They don't take initiative. Because that, you actually want to make sure that you hire people who are open to taking action and taking initiative. They bring things to the table instead of expecting you to be the primary spoke in the wheel, and that you then have to be babysitting each and every person. And it's a mindset thing. It's a problem that a lot of bookkeepers end up getting into, but it starts with us. Right. And then when we change, then it changes who you want to hire in your business. Right.
It starts with us, meaning you have vision for your business, you have culture, you have community, you have these tenets. I just put into chat the 5 tenets that LeanLaw hires to, and this is me very personally. I'm just going to run through it because I think it's very meaningful in this moment, Lorette, specifically to your comment. Number 1, are they a good fit for the organization? Do they fit well into us? And that's somewhat subjective, but do we feel connected and vibe with them and like them? 2, are they smart? 3, are they passionate for what they do? And are they passionate for this business? And do they want to work with us? Right? That's really important. And that right there tells you, are they an employee or are they a builder? Lastly, it goes into skills and experience. And here's why. Many times we start with experience and skills, but the truth is, if they're a bad fit, everything downstream doesn't work. It's just going to be problematic. If it's a fit, but they're not smart and they're not passionate, so you like them, but they're not well aligned, skills and experience don't mean anything. So you can always give skills and you can always gain experience, but you cannot fabricate fit, intellect, and passion. And those are the tenets that we look to when we hire at LeanLaw. And when we get it wrong, I hate to say this because it sounds harsh, but we fire quickly for both parties. We do not allow someone to vacillate. So So let's, we digress, but we still have time, so we're not running out of
Yeah,
time.
no, we're doing good today.
Doing fine. So here's this big awful word, setbacks, right? People have setbacks. It's not
Failure.
like you can do this in one perfect turn, right? It's a marathon. We haven't talked about that. But what is buoyed in setbacks is doubts and fears and failures and and growth. And so how do you coach someone to manage setbacks and work with all that sort of emotionality related to this process?
First of all, success is messy. Let's just go there. This is
Hard.
something, yes, this is
So
something
hard.
that goes back to sports psychology that I saw with the really top athletes, the ones at the top of the game, they were just killing it, versus the rest of the athletes, is that they approached failure differently than everybody else. And what they recognized that setbacks were necessary. They had to be willing to fail in order to succeed. It's not that they wanted to fail, but they were willing to give it their all and do everything that they could if it was going to help them to be able to move the needle forward and give them a competitive advantage in some way. Therefore, there's 4 things that I've taken away from this that I teach my clients when we're really looking to be able to grow, because growth has risk, it's uncomfortable, and you're not necessarily going to have confidence, but you want to be able to access the courage to do something that's outside of your comfort zone. So the first of the 4 things is you want to have what's called a new spin on failure. You want to be able to start to approach the way that you look at failure differently than before, because usually it's either you're achieving or you're failing. And it's a zero-sum game of you're either great or you suck. And that is really not what failure is about. It's recognizing that as you fail, it means that you actually are doing something you've never done before, and you're probably going to fail because you just don't know it all. It's a new skill or activity. Think about when you first got into bookkeeping, you made mistakes that you look at now, and you could probably do those things in your sleep, because in the beginning you just didn't have the insights, the know-how, or the experience. So start to look at failure differently. It's just part of moving forward and being successful. The next thing is removing personal judgment. When you are someone who tends to be a high achiever, you might have some fraud factors going on where you're afraid of being seen as an imposter or a fake. You don't do something to your expectations, then you're very, very difficult and critical of yourself, more critical than you would ever be of somebody else. I want to just acknowledge that you are so much more than any one action. You have so much that you do right. Beating up on yourself, putting yourself down, calling yourself names limits you and holds you back. And you don't need to punish yourself like that. Nobody deserves to be punished like that any longer. If you remove the personal judgment, you would be more free to move forward than when you are very critical of yourself. And that is something that can be shifted and worked on. The next thing is recognizing that the people that are at the top 1% of their category, whether they're athletes, bookkeeping professionals, whoever it is that you look up to, they are seeking mastery. With mastery, you approach this as a student first, recognizing that you're striving for excellence, not perfection. There's a difference. With excellence, you recognize that there's some room for mistakes and failure, that there's a learning curve. You can always work on continuing to get better, continuing to excel, as opposed to it being a destination. It is more of the journey and the process. The next and the last one, which is the most important, is that even if you didn't get the outcome you wanted, there were so many insights to be gained from moving forward in that direction. When you're looking at the fact that you did something, you didn't get the outcome are usually the metrics that you didn't achieve. You didn't hit a certain number, or maybe a certain outcome didn't quite happen, but you learned so much because you stepped up, and you did something that was new or outside of your comfort zone, as opposed to in spite of it. Therefore, take a new spin on failure. Look at it a little bit differently. It's part of the success path. Recognize that you are so much more complex than any one action or outcome. Remove the personal judgment. Come from it of a place of mastery, of always wanting to improve and get better. Be that student first. And then also insights are to be gained anytime you do something new. You grow because you stepped into it and the process that happens, as opposed to it being based upon the outcome.
Yeah, I think of everything we talked today, this is probably one of the most important nuggets that you're sharing and giving to the group. And I want to talk about it from a personal experience and add one little note from my perspective, which is it's okay to be transparent about failure. Because if you follow and have these mindsets, failure is just part of your character. And who is you are selling to next gets the luxury of not paying for that failure again. So in the investment community, I often will speak when we're talking to investors is, I've already failed a few times at companies, so I'm not going to make those mistakes again with your company. And so I've had two major failures professionally in my life. One was the lifestyle company that I did. And it wasn't a failure in that I lost all my money, but we spent money and we didn't make the money we expected. And I had a lot of shame associated with that because it was unsuccessful. And the second failure, which is I got fired from a job, which was like, I've never been fired, ever. Like I was the achiever. And it was because I was a bad fit and they were smart to fire me. But I can speak to that now very fluidly, both experiences, the personal experience of not succeeding in a job and the professional starting the company and failing. And both of them are like, they're like notches. They're like little prideful things that I've gone through. I've felt it, I've learned, I've grown, I've moved on. And I can speak to it in a very fluid way. And so when we think about this reframing of failure and talking about a journey, which I think is wonderful, think about, the idea of excellence versus some type of pinnacle destination, right? I think that's just such a smart, astute point. This is both a personal thing, right? A personal belief, but Lorette, to your point about your company, it's a cultural thing. If you put these tenets in your culture, as I said, I coach my staff that it's okay to fail. I mean, I don't want them to do something egregious and awful, right? I want them to just fail out of stupidity or fail out of negligence. But if they fail out of asserting themselves and putting it out there and trying something new or being accountable, I will back them from here to forever. Because LeanLaw can never grow and scale unless I empower my team to grow and scale and do the things that they're good at, they're joyful, that they seek joy from, and they're good at. So this last part I think is really powerful, because I think that we wrap our failure in this like, oh, we can't talk about it because we failed. Failure is, everyone fails. The most successful people in the world have failed.
I want to add something else onto that, because one of the things that I've seen is some of my biggest breakthroughs and successes have come on the heels of a failure. Something didn't work out as I expected or I anticipated. I went back and I really looked at things from a different perspective than when I went into that particular, down that particular course. And I may have made a pivot or gained an insight that led to the trajectory of my business in a different direction. It's really how I went from the sports psychology to the business coaching, is that there were some things that happened in the sports psychology piece that didn't work out as expected. I didn't get the outcome or the response that I wanted. I had some really tough conversations with my husband, Steve, about that. And that led to me putting the sports psychology on a back burner and really moving in this direction of business coaching.
And I think that from a business perspective, what I heard, a nuance of what you talked about was the concept of a minimal viable product. So in the software world, in the business world, you frame out a minimal viable product, which means what is the bare minimum? Like, what is the bare minimum of things we need in place to go either win a client or get some business or do a task? And the idea is that we don't want to start building more onto it, because we don't know what we're talking about. It's theoretical. There's assumptions, and we want to go prove it. So we don't spend a lot of time building things to perfection, thinking we need this all in place before we can do it. It's like we prop it up, we talk to people, we get feedback. To your point, we pivot, we learn, we change some things, and we keep. And once we start to get that rhythm of, okay, we're in the right direction, then you start to build out all of the nuances. So if you look at what LeanLaw was in 2015, it was a crude version of itself today. And many of the decisions, the biggest one I can say is practice management. We had some integration into LeanLaw where you could save emails and documents and do some things. And that was part of our theory. And what we quickly learned, it was wrong. So we ripped it out, and we never, ever were a practice management tool again. So MVP is really important as you think about growing your business. Now, let's wrap this up. And we started this process. I want you just to try to summarize really briefly, if they're going to walk away today with one or two little nuggets, what are they? And leave me a little time to stage the last step.
The main thing that I want to say is that if you feel that you have control issues or things need to be a certain way, it's worth challenging that. A lot of times we're too close to our own businesses. We can't see some of the ways that we're getting in our own way. It is helpful to have someone else maybe that's a little bit detached or has unique perspective, open up some ways of looking at things that you simply can't see because you're too close to it yourself. The other part of it is that you have to be willing to be messy, and that failure is part of success.
Totally. You have to accept that
it is so messy sometimes.
You're totally right. I mean,
especially now with everything going on with business changing, everybody has had to be adaptive in order to be able to make the changes, even if you already had a home-based business.
Yeah. So, Lauren, you talked about what can the group and listeners do next if they'd like to do some more?
Well, thank you for that, Jonathan. If someone has really resonated, they feel that this is what appeals to them, they're on that path, they want to be able to separate their fees from time by niching, by being able to get back some of their own personal life, they're tired of making the sacrifices. And you tend to be an overthinker, you second guess yourself, you've been in the research phase, it's been on your mind, you're now ready to take that next step, then I would love to have a conversation with you. I'm offering a complimentary Path to Profits strategy session where we look at where your business is now, where you would like it to be, some of the opportunities, some of the obstacles. If it looks like a fit for working together, we would talk about that as well. I'm putting the link in the chat also. It's at businesssuccesssolution.com/let's talk. It is an opportunity to really look at your business and what your path would look like to really have your business support your lifestyle instead of one where you're continuing to have to sacrifice.
Yeah, and I want to put out a personal note in that, you know, Lauren and I are quite good friends, and she shared with me a few of the success stories. And one of this, through this very medium, you know, she had a client that's a LeanLaw accounting pro that took something that just through the work and structure and dialogue and process, took something that was that she was losing money on, that first onboarding sort of cleanup, and turned it into an amazing profit center, like in the tens of thousands of dollars. So something she was losing money on, she flipped that around by understanding and working with Lauren, and it was incredibly productive and had a phenomenal outcome. So there are absolute success stories with working with Lauren. So as we end this, Lauren, I say thank you. I say thank you for your collaboration, your partnership, and your intellect. To the group, there will be, I sent you a link with the other two. LeanLaw will also put a link of this online if you want to share it with your community. So I'm going to, with that, end today's session. And thank you all for listening and participating and being part of our community. Lauren, thanks again, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much. Look forward to talking soon. Take care, Jonathan.